Hello from Canggu, Bali. It has been the most stressful day that I've had since I flew here, and maybe the most stressful day that I've had in several months, including being in New York. Driving in Canggu is more like driving in New York. Driving in Ubud is very genteel. I spoke about that, the beautiful flow of Balinese traffic, and driving in Canggu is not like that because it is overrun with really rude foreigners who are honking and who are aggressive and who are driving in a way that is scary to me. So at least the glory, the benefit is that I wound up here on this black sand beach. These people over here just made some beautiful drone pictures. We all made some beautiful drone pictures together. And I wanted to talk about the personal space bubble today because I went to an event the other night. I went to an open mic, and at this open mic, the night before, let me start with the night before. The night before the open mic, I went out, I went to that cacao ceremony, and I took the shuttle there, and for some reason the shuttle stops before the ceremony ends, so I couldn't take the shuttle back. I got a ride back, but I definitely wanted, it's uphill, downhill, it's very meandering, and I definitely wanted to have a helmet. And so there was a kind man who loaned me his helmet, a friend of my friend who invited me to the ceremony, and I borrowed it, and then I needed to get it back to him. So when I went to this open mic at the Gigi Batu Club, he came to pick up his helmet. And he sat with me as I was singing and appreciating the open mic and participating. And he took his seat and sat it down right next to me, literally right next to my hip. So he was right here, and I did not want him to be right here, so immediately I moved my seat another probably 12 to 15 inches away. And he then proceeded to bridge the gap between us by leaning over towards me. So I kind of stuck a knee out, I folded my leg and stuck it out so that hopefully he would remain at a distance. I wound up then moving away again, giving another nonverbal cue, moving a little bit further away, and then he leaned his hand on the table behind me and leaned over. And so I said, I need a bit more space. And he said, oh, okay. But he did not give that space. So around all of us is a personal space bubble. And this bubble is the amount of space that we need around us to feel comfortable, to feel safe. So that if a human enters into that personal space bubble without being invited, usually we feel uncomfortable, we feel violated. Now there are cultural differences, right? So a personal space bubble in New York and a personal space bubble in Wichita, Kansas are a bit different. Now if you don't know anything about Wichita, Kansas, I was teaching acro yoga around the country, and I asked people, the very first thing is I asked people to make a circle. Now everywhere else that I have asked people to make a circle, they have stood right next to one another with, maybe a foot or so in between them. I asked people to make a circle in Wichita, Kansas, and they were this far apart from one another, because in Wichita they have so much space. Kansas is full of plains and farmland, and it's flat as far as the eye can see. Driving across the country through Kansas, you go a little hazy because it's so flat. So we know that there are differences in context right? So on the subway, you know you're gonna be right next to people in a way that in the office, that would be uncomfortable. And we know that there are also cultural differences, right? So a personal space bubble in America is probably about an arm's length, right? That's why we shake hands. So you don't step into my personal space bubble, I have you at arm's length. Cultures that kiss on the cheek and get closer usually tend to have a smaller personal space bubble. It's closer to them. And I've heard that from people who have traveled to India, the personal space bubble is very, very, very small. And people are very, very close to one another, probably due to the population density in their city. I wrote notes because this one was so important to me, and also I found it really irksome. So it's contextual, and our personal space bubble expands or contracts based on who we're around, based on how hungry we are, based on how much sleep we've had, based on your menstrual cycle, if you have one, based on the environment, based on the context. Are you in a connection workshop? Are you at the gym? Are you in a writing class? Based on your emotional state. And I think that's one that has a great, strong effect on your personal space bubble. How am I feeling? Do I want people to come close? Do I need my alone time? So that's a way of having, alone time with people, is to have more personal space. Right, so at the open mic last night, he was encroaching upon my personal space, and I did not draw as strong a boundary as I wish I had. So I was thinking, well, what are some reasons why I might not have drawn as strong a boundary as I'm capable of drawing? And what are some reasons why people in general might not be drawing the kind of boundaries that they really want to in terms of protecting their personal space? One, we don't want to hurt other people's feelings. And this is really an interesting one because it points towards codependency. I'm not okay if you're not okay, and your okayness is more important to me than my okayness. It concerns me, right? This concern, this extra concern over other people's feelings is usually unhealthy, and it actually points to me. It doesn't really point to being concerned about that person. It points to being concerned about how I'm going to feel if they are upset. So it's actually about me. And I can think about it this way. Okay, so maybe I hurt his feelings. Well, he was hurting my body's feelings. My body did not want that kind of closeness, and I wish I had expressed it more clearly. Two, we feel like we owe them something. So in this case, it was very clear, right? I felt like I owed him because he loaned me his helmet the night before, which was a generous and kind and perhaps gallant thing to do. It seems, he might have had some ulterior motives for loaning me that helmet so that he would see me again, maybe. And might have this kind of experience when we're interacting with a boss, somebody in a position of power, somebody who has sway over our income or our life or a livelihood in some way. And we might be afraid to lose our stability, to lose our housing, to lose our job. I felt like I needed to repay his kindness with some sort of familiarity, comfortability, camaraderie, which in this case translated to proximity, but I really did not want to be that close to him. 3, we think it might be a cultural thing, and so we don't want to offend them. It might be a misguided attempt to show respect, except that if we're feeling uncomfortable, I don't know how high paying that respect is, or at what cost it's worth paying that respect. So this guy may indeed have come from a country of close talkers. He wasn't from here, neither am I. So I wonder, why is that close talking culture worthy of more respect than my talking at a distance culture? Especially since it's not the culture that we are immersed in now. It's not the Balinese culture that we're talking about. It's whatever is going on in what he's accustomed to. And 4, we might be unaccustomed to setting boundaries for our protection, safety, and comfort. This could be due to a history of sexual abuse. It could be stemming from things as seemingly innocuous as a parent saying, go hug your grandma, or go sit on your auntie's lap. And thus we felt that we had no agency, no control over our body, over what we did with it, over who we allowed to touch it and hug it, and whose lap we sat on. I was a very apparently particular lap sitter, and I'm quite proud of that now, because I see that as little me drawing boundaries about what she did and did not want to do with her own body. Generally, my preference is for nonverbal communication in physical interactions, nonverbal communication, nonverbal escalation. It's not my personal preference to be asked, may I touch your shoulder, may I touch your arm, may I touch your breast, may I touch your stomach. I like to engage with somebody who I am really enthusiastically excited about connecting with, and then to do a nonverbal dance of escalation until there's a no. And then we can verbalize that no. And that's not the model of consent that is mostly being taught these days. And I do think that that model of consent is very important, especially for people who have experienced violation around their sexuality. It's just not my personal preference for how I like to engage sexually or sensually. However, if I give a nonverbal cue like moving my chair away again, then I may need to give a verbal cue if somebody's not getting it. And I did. I said I need some space, but I could have been clearer. I could have escalated verbally with more clarity. I could have said, could you give me more space, please? You are a bit too close to me for my comfort right now. And then I could make a request. I could say, could you give me this much space? I would like this much space to feel comfortable. So if we are escalating non-verbally, for instance, I could have moved my seat. Instead of just sliding my seat away from him, I could have actually moved seats. I could have moved to a seat at the table that would put the table between us. But if we escalate non-verbally and the person still isn't getting what we are asking for, then we might have to escalate verbally. And in this case, I think I could have said, hey, I'm really feeling like I need more personal space, and could you please give me this amount? So more is very general. More just means anywhere from a little bit to a lot more than what you've given me right now. But this amount is specific. A person can take that request and act upon it. And if they are offended by the request, then perhaps they're not someone that I want to be engaging with at all. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this, you'll love Horizontal with Lila, the podcast of intimacies recorded while lying down, wearing robes. This is recorded at a black sand beach in Canggu, Bali. I love you. Tune into my live video show, the second ever, on vulnerability hangovers, Wednesday night on Get Vocal, GETVOKL, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.